Ethan Brooks, a billionaire tech entrepreneur known for his sharp mind and unmatched ambition, was restless. Sleep had evaded him for weeks. The constant noise of investor calls, deadlines, and boardroom tension had drained him. That night, needing air and clarity, he slipped into his sleek black car and drove aimlessly through the silent city. The streets were empty, lit only by flickering streetlights and the occasional glow of a storefront. As he approached a red light near a small, quiet park, his eyes were drawn to a figure curled up on a bench. Something about the posture tugged at him. As his headlights shifted, the woman's face became clear, and his heart dropped. It was Maria. She had been working in his mansion for over 7 years. Always kind, quiet, and dependable. The woman who brewed his morning coffee exactly how he liked it, who noticed when he skipped meals and gently left food by his office door. The same Maria who never complained, who never asked for anything. Now here she was, wrapped in a thin shawl, wearing the same faded uniform she wore to his home, asleep under the cold night sky. Ethan stared in disbelief. How could someone so close to his world be suffering right in front of him, and he hadn't even noticed? A lump formed in his throat. In that moment, everything he thought he understood about success, wealth, and human connection began to shift. He couldn't drive away. Not this time. The next morning, Ethan couldn't shake the image of Maria on that bench. It haunted him. At breakfast, he quietly observed her as she moved through her usual routine, serving coffee, tidying up the living room, adjusting the curtains to let in the light. She looked tired, but her smile hadn't faded. She didn't speak of the night before, and Ethan didn't mention it either. Not yet. Later that afternoon, he gently called her into his study under the pretense of discussing something minor. When she sat down, he looked her in the eye and asked, "Maria, are you okay?" For a long moment, she said nothing. Her eyes welled up, but she quickly blinked the tears away. Then, quietly, she opened up. Her husband had passed away a year ago after a sudden heart attack. She had tried to stay strong for her son, who was now battling a chronic illness. Between hospital bills, funeral costs, and rising rent, she had lost everything. She used what little she earned to buy medicine and food for her child. At night, after finishing her work, she returned to the street. "I didn't want to lose this job, or your respect," she said, her voice trembling. So I said nothing. Ethan sat in stunned silence. He had lived in luxury while someone who served him daily had been silently breaking. The guilt hit hard. She didn't ask for help. But now that he knew, he couldn't ignore it. Not anymore. In the days that followed, Ethan was no longer the same. The image of Maria sleeping in the cold, and her quiet confession, echoed in his mind like a bell he couldn't unring. He began watching her more closely, not out of suspicion, but with new awareness. He noticed how she wore the same shoes every day, how she skipped meals when she thought no one was looking, how her hands trembled slightly when she folded laundry. Ethan didn't confront her again. Instead, he started making quiet moves behind the scenes. He contacted a doctor and anonymously covered all of Maria's son's medical expenses. He connected with a social worker to understand what support systems existed, and where they failed. He even visited the rundown shelter where Maria occasionally stayed, seeing firsthand the bleak conditions she'd been enduring after long shifts in his spotless home. He raised her salary significantly, disguised as a promotion bonus, but Maria tried to refuse it. "I didn't earn this, sir," she insisted. But Ethan only smiled and said, "You've earned more than I ever gave you credit for." Still, he knew money wasn't enough. Maria's dignity mattered. Her story wasn't just hers, it was the story of thousands like her. That's when he knew he had to do something bigger. Something lasting. Something that could turn quiet suffering into visible change. Ethan didn't just want to help her survive. He wanted to help her rise, and take others with her. The night of the annual gala arrived, a grand event filled with high-profile guests, media, investors, and employees. It was the kind of evening where Ethan usually talked profits, products, and projections. But this time, he had something different in mind. As the room buzzed with laughter and champagne, Ethan walked onto the stage, noticeably more serious than usual. The crowd hushed. He began by thanking his team, but then paused and said, "Tonight, I want to tell you about someone most of you will never see in a boardroom. But who taught me more about strength and grace than any CEO ever could." He motioned to the side of the stage. Slowly, nervously, Maria stepped out, wearing a modest dress Ethan had gifted her that morning, her eyes wide with disbelief. "This is Maria," Ethan said, his voice steady but emotional. "She has worked in my home for over 7 years. I thought I knew her story. I didn't." He shared her journey, her loss, her sacrifice, her resilience, and how she chose dignity over pity, silence over complaint. The room was silent, hanging on every word. Then came the announcement that left everyone stunned. Ethan revealed the launch of the Maria Foundation, a charitable organization dedicated to supporting single mothers working as domestic helpers across the country, offering them housing, healthcare, education, and legal protection. Many in the crowd were in tears. Maria stood motionless, overwhelmed, her hands over her mouth. For the first time, the world truly saw her. And they stood and clapped. Maria never imagined her life would change so drastically. Just weeks earlier, she had been sleeping on a park bench, shivering through the night, praying only for her son to live one more day. Now, she lived in a warm, comfortable apartment close to the hospital where her son received full treatment, paid for entirely by the foundation that bore her name. But it wasn't just about the apartment, or the healthcare, or the steady income. It was about being seen, respected, valued. She began working with the foundation Ethan had created, not as a face for pity, but as a voice for women like her, strong, silent warriors who had been overlooked for far too long. She spoke at events. She helped design programs. She even started classes to train women in skills beyond domestic work, helping them dream bigger. As for Ethan, the experience had changed him too. The man once obsessed with bottom lines now cared more about impact. He still ran his company, but with a different lens, one rooted in empathy. One day, as Maria stood watching her son laugh on a playground, Ethan walked up beside her. They didn't say much. Just a smile. A quiet nod. 2 lives forever changed, not by wealth or power, but by a single act of awareness. Because sometimes, the greatest gift we can give is simply seeing someone, and choosing not to look away. And from that moment forward, Maria was never invisible again.